The government have over the years, people have been suggesting all kinds to the government of the day because everybody felt like the cost of governance is really too high in Nigeria and it has to be cut down. But really, no one has been able to face the president here. But of course, we have someone who has challenged the president, who have faced him to tell him that he must cut the cost of governance and not public service. I wonder why a government will want to cut public services work and rather be facing governance and increase the budget and everything for governance and be cutting that of public service. You're only doing the citizens a disservice if you are cutting down on public services. Anyway, more details will come to you shortly, but please, if you have not subscribed, ensure you hit the subscribe button and also give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to turn on your notification bell. Yes, social economic rights and accountability project SERAP had urged President Muhammad Buhari to cut the cost of governance and implement bold transparency and accountability measures in its government response to Nigeria's second recession in 5 years. The organization made its call in an open letter signed by its Deputy Director Kolawole Oluwadare dated 21st November 2020. This is coming after the National Bureau of Statistics (NBS) has confirmed that Nigeria's economy has slipped into another recession, the second time since 2016. According to Serap, the economic crisis comes with an opportunity to prioritize access of poor and vulnerable Nigerians to basic socio-economic rights and a genuine fight against corruption. The organization also urged the federal government to increase investment in public health and healthcare system, education service, provision of clean water, and other basic public goods and services that will benefit majority of the population. This economic crisis provides an opportunity to prioritize access of poor and vulnerable Nigerians to basic socio-economic rights and to genuinely recommit to the fight against corruption. The country cannot afford getting back to business as usual, the letter stated. Implementing human rights, transparency, and accountability measures would have money, address projected adverse human rights impacts of the recession, and fast-track the economic recovery process. It is not too late to take urgent measures that would put the country's wealth and resources to work for the common good of all Nigerians. Decades of mismanagement and corruption and deep-seated deficiencies in public financial management have directly contributed to higher levels of borrowing and public debt, and consequently, the economic recession successive governments have squandered the promise afforded by the country's natural wealth and resources. The paltry resources Nigeria invests in essential public goods and services that would benefit ordinary Nigerians can be partly explained by the high spending of public funds to finance a life of luxury for members of the National Assembly, state governors, and other powerful politicians. The country's resources appears to have been used almost exclusively for the benefit of the political elites rather than on projects that would ensure the right to an adequate standard of living, the maximum welfare, prosperity, freedom, and happiness of every citizen of the basis of social justice and equality. SERAP is seriously concerned about the adverse consequences of economic crisis on the human rights of poor and vulnerable Nigerians, including denying them access to essential public goods and services such as healthcare, education, clean water, and regular electricity supply. We would be grateful if your government begins to implement the recommended action and measure within 14 days of the receipt or publication of this letter. If we have not heard from you by then, as to the steps being taken in this direction, SERAP shall take all appropriate legal actions to compel your government to implement these recommendations for the sake of human rights and transparency and accountability. Nigeria has been poorly governed for many years, with systemic and widespread corruption at all levels of government contributing to failures by successive governments to deliver essential public goods and services to Nigerians, contrary to the country's constitution and human rights and anti-corruption obligations. Huge budgetary allocation to fund security votes, renovate the National Assembly complex, pay jumbo salaries and allowances to members of the National Assembly, and life pensions to former governors and their deputies, as well as massive corruption in ministries, departments and agencies (MDAs) contribute to low provisions for health, education and other essential public goods and services. Prioritizing the human rights of poor and vulnerable Nigerians means providing public goods and services free of charge for those who cannot afford them. This is the time to prioritize poor and vulnerable Nigerians and to ensure that any response to the recession goes well beyond bailing out large companies and banks. Our requests are brought in the public interest and in keeping with the requirements of the Nigerian Constitution 1999 as amended and Nigeria's international obligations, including under the UN Convention Against Corruption and the International Convention on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, as well as the UN Guiding Principles on Human Rights Impact Assessment of Economic Reforms. Your government ought to have taken full advantage of court judgments, ordering the full recovery of stolen public funds, recovery of life pension collected by former governors and their deputies, and mandating your government to hold to account corrupt electricity contractors and companies that collected billions of naira but disappeared with public funds without executing any projects. The continuing failure to enforce this judgment had contributed to increasing level of borrowing and in the process, the inability to fulfill the country's anti-corruption and human rights obligation to progressively realize the human rights of poor and vulnerable Nigerians, including their rights to affordable and decent health care, clean water, adequate sanitation, and education. As the National Bureau of Statistics stated, the country's GDP recorded a negative growth of 3.62% in the third quarter of 2020. The country had earlier recorded a 6.10% contraction in the second quarter. So obviously you can see that in every aspect, Nigeria is actually moving backwards instead of going forward. So hopefully now that Serap says they've given the federal government 14 days to respond, I hope they do. But all the same, my people, thank you for listening. Whatever I have to say, drop it in the comment section and give this video a thumbs up. Do have a pleasant time. Bye for now.